Hi, it's Manic44 here, and today I invite you to the review of the M904G replica by Double Eagle. Today's review is sponsored by my patrons. Double Eagle is not a company that reminds me of a good replicas, so I was surprised when I saw the growing popularity of these replicas and decided to see what was good about it. The M904G itself is the cheapest replica of the M900 series, and it belongs to the range of replicas considered cheap or for beginners. But among them, it is distinguished by the built-in optical MOSFET named by Double Eagle the Falcon Fire Control Unit. In today's review, as always, I will show you how the replica is built, what's inside and what performance it has. But let's start with a small unboxing. The black cardboard box has a transport handle, and inside we'll find a sheet from testing the replica in the store, Falcon System Instruction Manual, the replica's manual, a card with safety rules. In small black box we'll find additional accessories such as an adapter from Tamiya to TDS due to the fact that the replica has TDS plugs as standard, an Allen key for which I did not find a use in this model, a key for winding high-cap magazines, also not useful in this model, the key to unscrew the front, more on that later, and a TDS socket with heat shrink tubing and instructions for its installation in the battery if the one that we have a different socket. We will also find a ramrod, of course, a metal high-cap magazine, and the M904G replica itself. Let's take a closer look at it. The length of the replica with folded stock is about 61 cm, and with the stock fully extended it is about 71 cm. The replica is very light and with magazine, but without the battery it weighs just over 2 kg. The low weight of the replica is due to use of reinforced polymer from which the front, body, stock, pistol grip and sides are made. The outer barrel with the flash hider, manipulators, trigger, changing handle and the stock guides are made of metal. Going from the front we'll find a flash hider that can be removed. Just unscrew the Allen screw on the bottom and we can unscrew it. It will give us access to a 40mm counterclockwise thread. The light front has a M-lock mounting system. The wrist rail running through its entire length smoothly flows into the upper rail on the upper receiver. On the upper rail you will also find a foldable polymer sights in the form of a front sight that can be adjusted vertically, and a rear sight with two sides of holes to choose from, which can be adjusted horizontally. When folded, the sights have a low unadjustable front sight and rear sight, but they are too low to use them normally. The polymer from which the replica is made seems durable, but it shines clearly, and I found strange imperfections on it. The body itself has an interesting design. It is complemented by a double-sided fire selector and an enlarged magazine release and a reloading handle. After pulling it, we have access to the rotary hop-up chamber. By turning the knob down, we increase the power, and by turning it up, we decrease it. The replica does not have a dummy bolt lock, therefore, when setting the hop-up, the handle must be pulled all the time. The selector straight from the box offers standard setting modes, that is safe, single fire, and continuous fire. The selector itself works with resistance and locks well in the selected positions. Additionally, thanks to the built-in MOSFET, we can program several other modes that I will show later. The pistol grip is quite narrow and the texture improving the grip is very clear and makes the replica fit well in the hand. The PDW stock has a centrally located sling mount. To unlock it, press the button on both sides, then the stock will pop back. Apart from completely folded, we have two other lengths to choose from. In order to get to the space for the battery, we have to remove this element. As I mentioned, the replica is wired with TDS plug. There's a lot of space for a PDW stack, and I managed to fit a Turnitin Nanotech 11.1V 1200 mAh battery with dimensions of 116 by 16 by 19 mm, and a smaller battery also shall fit, just watch out for the wiring. The replica has a quick spring change system, we only need a long Allen key. Just remove the butt stank and disassemble this element. Unscrew the screw in the stock and we have access to the guide. I turn it by 90 degrees and I can replace the spring with another one. The replica, due to the fact that it's made of polymer, can be bent under greater pressure, but I will describe the fitting of the elements as a very good. A clear slack can be only found on the stock. High cap magazine is made of metal and it fits snugly in the replica and will not fall out by itself. If you insert it at the wrong angle, it won't lock and you have to push it in. I haven't observed it with other magazines. Before disassembling the replica, let's see what the Falcon unit built in the replica offers. The first mode that we can change is the auto mode for a series of shots. To do this, just switch the replica to safe, press and hold the trigger for about 3 seconds until the motor vibrates 3 times and release the trigger. Now I press the trigger once and the system will confirm it with 1 vibration. Now, depending on how many times I press the trigger, these many shots will be fired in series, in the range between 1 and 5. I switch to auto and I can test new settings. The trigger sensitivity is another option. The replica is set to the highest sensitivity by default, but we can change it. I set the replica to safe again and press the trigger for about 3 seconds until the motor vibrates and I release the trigger. Now I press it twice, which is confirmed by the system with 2 vibrations. Now, depending on the number of trigger presses, we have choice of 1 trigger pull, high sensitivity, 2 pulls, medium sensitivity, and 3 standard sensitivity. The last function is binary trigger. I enter the programming mode as in the previous examples. I press the trigger 3 times and the system confirms the selection with 3 vibrations. Now the replica will fire semi with each press and release of the trigger. If you want to reset the system to factory settings, just hold the trigger on safe until you feel a constant vibration. The system remembers the setting after disconnecting the power supply, and in addition to the presented modes, it has additional functions. It will inform us with the vibrations about too high power consumption and about too low and too high voltage. The circuit itself will operate on voltage between 6 and 14 volts, and here is a very important thing to remember. It is true that the system cuts off the power when the battery voltage is too low, which means that we will not be able to shoot, but it will still consume current, exactly about 28 mA, which may cause it to discharge the connected battery to zero and damage it. In the visible example, the battery has already discharged below 6 volts, which should be avoided in LiPo packs. Further discharge could result in catastrophic failure. I'm talking about this because I saw a few posts that people left the battery connected for a whole night or even several days and it broke. Remember to never leave the battery connected in the replica if you are not using it. Each replica with a MOSFET system will consume some current in standby mode, and thus, if left the battery plugged in, it may damage it over time. As an interesting fact, I will add that the Jefferson Leviathan V2 optical system takes about 11.8 mA regardless of the fire mode, and the gate duster is about 23.7 mA. But when I set it to safe, the consumption drops and fluctuates between 1.4 and 0.6 mA. This is very little, but still don't leave the battery connected. We know what the replica looks like from the outside, let's see how to take it apart. I'll start by separating the body halves. I unscrew the screw from the front pin and take it out. To slide the upper receiver, I have to pry the dummy bolt release button that is blocking in this place. Now the whole thing will come off without problem. We will take a look at the barrel assembly in a moment. First, I would like to show you how interesting the front is mounted. To remove it, unscrew the nut with a wrench from the set. After loosening it, the whole element can be pulled out and the front is removed. The element rests on the front on the one side and on the barrel ring on the other, a very interesting solution. Let's go back to the barrel assembly and the chamber. The rotary hop-up chamber is made of polymer. has an interesting spacer arm with an insert for a dedicated spacer. The knob itself has a groove for adjusting the pressure only on its half, which reduces the possibility of precise adjustment of the pressure. The backing is quite soft. Its connect element is divided into protrusions, which in theory should improve accuracy, but the backing itself is slightly shorter than the standard hop-up backing and was also quite heavily lubricated. The brass barrel is 250 mm long. The muzzle of the barrel is quite deeply chamfered, which in theory should help to evenly expand the air behind the BB at its exit, and ensure that the BB does not catch the barrel tip and changes the direction of the flight. In the window, a groove was made that reduces the depth going towards the front. First I thought it was something like the Poseidon air cushion system, because these replicas under the name Poseidon Punisher are sold in the US. But there, the groove goes along the entire length of the barrel. Here I bet this is to help to position the BB in the chamber properly. It's time for the lower receiver. I'll start with disassembling the stock and removing the guide with the spring. The guide is made of metal, and interestingly, instead of just having a bearing, the whole cone can rotate here. Spring here has an irregular coil pitch. Now it's time for pistol grip. The plate is held by two small Torx screws. After unscrewing them, I can remove the plate and take out the motor. I will describe the motor as standard. Two more screws in the grip, and the whole grip comes off easily. The replica has double-sided selectors, which I also had to unscrew. The left one has a spring in a small element blocking the selector at the set point. The right one does not, and it's a bit shorter. Selectors have a different mountings and are not interchangeable. In order to disassemble the magazine release, it's enough to unscrew the screw, remove the button and the spring, and the magazine lock itself will fall out of the other side. What's left is to knock out the pin on the trigger and unscrew the rear pin, and attention here. It may happen that the pin cannot be unscrewed because it will rotate around its axis. Here a clever solution has been used, because when looking at the pin on the other side of the gearbox, you will notice that it has a hole. All you have to do is insert a small Allen key into this hole, and we have a way to hold the pin to unscrew it. After unscrewing it and knocking it out, you can pull out the gearbox. The lower receiver itself does not look bad, and I think it's stiffer than the one in the recently reviewed Evolution Ghost. The first thing that caught my eye was a very sloppy execution of the rounding of the cylinder window. The holes are too small or are practically non-existent. If they were properly made, they will reduce the chances of the shell breaking. Here, they do not fulfill their function. After unscrewing all the screws and disassembling the selector gears, I can look inside. Inside it is very dry. There will be minimal amount of grease on the shell and the gears. The gears themselves are standard set with a gear ratio of 18:1 and are mounted on 8mm bearings. Bushings are mounted on the sector gear and the spur gear, and the ball bearing on the motor gear. The gears are shimmed pretty well and play is rather acceptable, and the whole set spins quite nicely. In the appearance, the Falcon unit is very similar to the Gate Titan. It consists of a top plate which has an LED for the cycle detection system and a set of sensors responsible for detecting the lever of trigger press. On the lower plate we'll find a sensor of the cycle detection system and a diode illuminating the sensor detecting the level of the trigger press. These two sensors with an illuminating diode are responsible for the detection of the selector settings. The selector plate itself has a white sticker glued on it. The wires in corners are secured with hot glue. Honestly, I do not know what to think about a solution like this. Personally, I would be afraid that the glue will loosen and fall into gears. Let's move to the pneumatics. The polymer piston has 3 metal teeth. The polymer piston head has a bearing and 8 ventilating holes. The polymer cylinder head has 1 O-ring, a brass nozzle and a fairly thick bumper. I must add that it fit with the frame is very good. The head fits tightly into its place and there is no play at all. It rests well against the front of the frame, thanks to which it will evenly transfer the load from the piston. Type 2 cylinder is made of aluminum with well-finished edges. The directional polymer nozzle is not sealed and its length is about 21.2 mm. It is mounted on a fairly rigid tappet plate. The tappet plate spring itself is very strong, which should minimize the number of problems with fitting the BBs. When it comes to seal, the system works perfectly and passes the syringe test without any problems. Interestingly, with the nozzle in the retracted position, there are leaks and the system loses its seal, but with the extended nozzle it maintains this seal again. It surprised me so much that I had to test it again, and it ended with the same result. I must say that such seal in this price range is a rarity, so a big plus for Double Eagle. Let's see what the performance of the replica is. I test the replica on 0.28 gram BBs from Spetsnaz Edge and Ternigi Nanotech 11.1V 1200 mAh battery. With a set hop-up, the replica generates on average of about 1.35 joules and the rate of fire is about 15 BBs per second. It is time for a shooting test, and I also use 0.28 gram BBs from Spetsnaz Edge. That day there was a slight gust of wind from the right side, which will be visible on the flight path of some BBs. At 30 meters, hitting a target slightly larger than a crush in person is not a problem on semi or auto. It is similar for 40 meters. Hitting from 50 meters is still possible, but it will be more difficult. Additionally, I notice uneven spinning of the BBs. Some shots are clearly more curled. Hitting from 60 meters is only possible when aiming over the target a bit. It is clearly visible that the BBs reaching the target significantly reduce the flight height, so I will define the effective range at 50 meters and the maximum range just over 60 meters. I had the replica with me on one game with a weaker spring generating about 0.86 joules, and it worked very well at the distance up to 40 meters max. The Double Eagle M904G is a primarily interesting option for people on a low budget who are looking for a replica with which they can go to a game straight out of the box. The polymers used to make the replica are very light, but shines a bit. Its fitting is okay, so it makes a good impression when you hold it in your hands. The PDW stock has a lot of space, the pistol grip is comfortable and the manipulators work as they should. The pneumatics used in the replica are characterized by a very good seal and the shimming of the gears is okay, so the set rotates with any major problems. A big advantage is also the DTS plug used, which in my opinion should already be a standard in all new replicas, and of course the Falcon Opticon system replacing the standard contact. It did not cause any problem during use and additional programming options will certainly find their applications. On the downside, I will definitely include rounding the corners of the cylinder window, which do not fulfill their task, and the shell and gears are very poorly lubricated, but the hop-up backing is almost flooded. I also do not see the benefits of a fancy barrel and backing because the range and accuracy do not differ from the usual solutions. I also advise future users to be careful with the built-in Falcon MOSFET, as I have read about the cases where it just burned out. After taking the replica apart and playing with it, I begin to understand why it's so popular. Low price, nice construction and a lot of features make it hard for other replicas to compare with it in this price range. I would, however, personally change the hop-up rubber in it and preferably also the barrel and chamber. I would also change the piston to one with full metal rack, and in addition I would fix the reducing of the cylinder window. And, of course, lubricate the gears better. Besides it, it seems to me that there is nothing else to change. Let me know what do you think about the M904G, and if you use one, tell me how it works for you. And for now, Thanks for watching and see you next time.